There is literally nothing more important than this. So I want to know, what is your journey when you talk about, you're a public Christian and you talk about biblical citizenship, that if you're going to take the Bible seriously, it leads to how you behave as an American citizen. But first of all, quick question, what is the Patriot Academy before we get into your journey in founding it?
Yeah, man, I started it back when I was a legislator in Texas and just frustrated with where we were going and how little of the foundation we had and how little people knew what you just described, which is the secret sauce, the secret ingredients to what made America great in the first place. And Patriot Academy now teaches people that secret sauce. So whether it's our biblical citizenship course being taught in churches across the country, or our constitutional defense course being taught in gun clubs and places like that across the country to teach the Second Amendment, it's all about going back to the founding formula and say, hey, why did America become the most successful, most powerful, most free, most benevolent nation in history? There has to be a reason. There has to be a cause for the effect. And we just lost that completely. I mean, the tyranny we saw over the last 2 years of these petty tyrant governors, people being willing to give up their freedom, those were horrible, but they were just symptoms. They were symptoms of the underlying cause that had been festering for decades, which is civic and biblical ignorance. We don't know the formula anymore, and that's what we're trying to bring back to rebuild those foundations.
And obviously the reason that it went away, folks, let's be honest, we only notice things sometimes when they're gone or they're nearly gone, because we don't realize they're going away until suddenly you think, hey, where's that thing? Yeah. In my lifetime, because of Hollywood and because of the culture, the drift from the 60s, we adopted this kind of anti-American narrative. And like all lies, there's plenty of truth baked into it. That's why we believe it. So when you talk about the way this country dealt with the slavery issue, when you talk about the way this country dealt with the Native Americans, there are plenty horrible, sick sins in our history. So that's right. That's true. But in dealing with it from the 60s onward, we kind of got stuck in the negative narrative. And instead of saying, like, we want to fix these things, we have fixed these things, we desire to change what we did wrong. Yeah. We desire to repent and to get it right and to be faithful to the founder's vision. Instead of that, we kind of got caught in this negative narrative. And that has washed over the culture. It's basically an anti-American Marxist narrative, which aims to destroy America. And by the way, when you destroy America, Dr. King talked about our founding documents as promissory notes. In other words, he spoke about them positively, that they got this right in these documents. Have we lived them out? No. Let's live them out. But instead, we have a new narrative that's come in that says all the founders were corrupt. They didn't write anything worth studying. We're gonna blow it all up and do something else. And we have to be blunt. You can't. The wise voices over the centuries have understood this is what Lincoln called the last best hope of earth. In other words, in terms of governments, this is the best we've ever seen. He called America God's almost chosen people. In other words, God has given us a holy burden in this country. And if we don't know that, we just kind of let it drift. And so we have drifted to a place where most people don't appreciate this, and where folks like Rick Green, founder of the Patriot Academy, and I, and some others are trying to say, folks, we need to wake up yesterday. This is absolutely crucial. The insane chaos erupting everywhere is a result of we took our eye off the ball. So tell my audience, Rick, again, what exactly is the Patriot Academy? How can people get plugged into that before we get into more?
Well, part of it is just our approach. What you just mentioned is so important. We too often go to the two extremes. Either everything in America is bad, or we have this Pollyanna, gloss over the negative and the sins. And what we say is, look, you got to teach the good, the bad, and the ugly. You got to show all of it, because when you actually step back and you look at it in the context of history, the American story is absolutely amazing despite those sins. The whole world had those sins. The whole world was dealing with slavery. Every nation on the planet had it. And the truth is, when you really teach the total history, you're amazed to find out that America actually was the first to end the slave trade. We beat England by 3 weeks. We were the fourth nation to end slavery completely after a war that had 600,000 casualties. There's 90 nations still that haven't ended slavery. And so when you get that full big picture and you look at the progress made by a Lincoln and by an MLK when they were quoting from the Declaration almost as much as they were the Bible, and you look at the progress that we had even after the 60s in terms of racial reconciliation, and then you look at how much we've stepped back and gone backwards. Now we're judging each other by color of skin rather than content of character, doing the opposite of what MLK wanted because we don't know the history. Because of it, you just described it perfectly. People take a kernel of truth and they say, well, this founding father had slaves, so they're automatically evil. Instead of going, oh, wow, this founding father who had slaves worked his entire life to try to end slavery, talked about the evils of slavery.
Look,
we don't tell that whole story.
This is at the heart of cancel culture, and it's anti-biblical. And I'll put it this way. MLK was an adulterer, okay, folks? You don't cancel somebody for a sin. You look at what they were doing, okay? Thomas Jefferson, we know. George Washington, slave owners. We know that's wrong. We know that's evil, but you don't wipe them out. You know, it's kind of like discovering that Isaac Newton was a sinner. So calculus is stupid, and I don't believe in gravity. That's not right. You have to have a biblical view that says human beings are sinners and there's grace, and it's a little complicated, but we have fallen into this Marxist, anti-biblical, anti-human, anti-American trap in the culture where we're canceling people. We're finding what they did wrong. So there are plenty of people, some of them cultural Marxists, some of them actual white supremacists, they would love to cancel Martin Luther King Jr. But when you read Letter from a Birmingham Jail, when you read other things that he said and that he did, you say, wait a second, this man was used by God remarkably. David was used by God remarkably. I don't think David was perfect. We need to have a biblical view, and that's part of the larger narrative that we have lost in America. And you guys at the Patriot Academy are trying to wake people up to that. What is the website, by the way, for Patriot Academy?
PatriotAcademy.com. And Eric, what you just said is so spot on. I was shocked. You know, I've been studying the Founding Fathers for 30 years. I was shocked to find out that they were human. You know?
It's such a bizarre
they committed
thing.
Sins.
It doesn't mean there's not a price, folks. We know that, right? That we take these things seriously, okay? I don't think adultery and slave owning are like no problem. But we have to look at the bigger picture. We'll be right back.
And what God can do with fallen people, right? What He can do with
that's the point, and that's all He's got to work with.
You and me both, right?
We're talking to Rick Green. You can go to patriotacademy.com. We'll be right